This video is sponsored by Surfshark. More on them in just a second. So, now F1 has quite literally survived its experience in Saudi Arabia. The next stop on its 2022 calendar takes us back to Australia, the country where the wildlife kills you, the forest kills you, and if you're an avid Twitter user, McLaren's recent form will kill you as well. Hey there guys, and welcome to FP1 and the Comedy Review, the show hosted by a man who will be very tired this week. Then again, this is the one race where non-Europeans get to laugh at us for a change. You're welcome. Anyway, before we get into the action, I want to quickly thank Surfshark for keeping my financials afloat this week. For sponsoring this video. If you've watched some of my videos before, you should know who Surfshark are already. But if you haven't, here's a quick refresher. Surfshark VPN keeps your online identity safe by encrypting all the information sent between your device and the internet, keeping whatever you choose to look at away from the eyes of big companies or cybercriminals. And hey, I'm not judging. And while you're browsing, Surfshark's Clean Web feature blocks ads, trackers and malware from ruining your day, further improving your safety online. But that's not all the VPN does, as Surfshark has 3,200 servers in 65 different countries, meaning you can surf the web from pretty much anywhere you want. The benefits of this are endless. For instance, Austria has a free-to-air contract with Formula 1, so just switch your location and finally, you'll be rid of Paul di Resta licking Max Verstappen's arsehole. Sound interesting? Using the link below and the code FP1 gets you 83% off the software and 3 extra months for free. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's literally no risk in giving it a go. More information can be found in the link in the description below. But now, let's get into the comedy review of the Australian Grand Prix.
We are a fucking bunch of wankers.
So let's get started with the news, and perhaps the most obvious topic is the Melbourne track itself, which has seen significant reworks ahead of the 2022 Grand Prix. In a bid to make the race actually interesting, several corners have been reprofiled and the new 4th DRS zone has been added along the new back straight. How did F1 fans react to the good news? Well, they f***ing hated it. Honestly, we spend years moaning that overtaking's too hard, that Hamilton dominates everything, that Mazepin shouldn't be in F1, and now all three of those things have changed and we're still not happy. I'll never understand some of you, but let's move on. In other news, a new Grand Prix has been announced in Las Vegas in late 2023, ending on a Saturday night so the drivers can all get drunk afterwards. And personally, I'm a big fan of this approach. Returning back to Australia, we also started to see teams bringing new upgrades to their 2022 cars. For instance, McLaren tried an innovative new alternative to carbon fibre, and Aston Martin finally recaptured Sebastian Vettel, forcing him back into the green shitbox for round 3. FP1 would get underway down under then, and it was the Ferraris that were looking good out of the gate. Carlos Sainz ending the session fastest for the Scuderia, just ahead of his teammate Charles Leclerc. Despite winning in Saudi Arabia, Red Bull appeared on the back foot early on this weekend, attempting a new strategy of shedding parts in the way of other drivers. I guess that's one way to reduce the weight of these new 2022 cars. Another team that appeared to be struggling were Haas, with Kevin Magnussen conveniently not feeling 100% after spending dinner with Nikita Mazepin. For legal reasons, that was a joke. And while we're on the subject, I think you all know what it's time for. Or do you?
What are we doing? Racing or ping pong?
Hello and welcome to Aston Watch, because Haas aren't shit anymore. Good for me then that the Silverstone-based team have kindly stepped into their shoes, with Sebastian Vettel's grand return halted after his car killed itself in frustration towards the end of free practice 1. Vettel decided he would then pay $5,000 to hop in some faster machinery to finish the lap. This meant he was unable to participate in FP2, a session where Leclerc continued to stretch his muscles in the Ferrari. In fact, the Aston's pace was so bad, Seb hasn't even named his car yet, a tradition he's upheld since his debut in Formula 1. But to help him out, I've got a really good suggestion. Skata, which is Greek. for shitbox. Anyway, Vettel would thank his mechanics for their hard work by giving them more, as he binned it in the wall during FP3. And if Aston's day couldn't get any worse, Lance Stroll decided now would be the time to learn from his more experienced teammate, and sandwich his car into the wall as well. As Lawrence Stroll hopped onto a phone call with the Volkswagen Group, McLaren were at least showing some good form, as Lando Norris topped the final practice session of the weekend. Meanwhile, Sergio Perez would show that his performance in Saudi Arabia was no fluke, finishing third behind Leclerc. However, reigning world champion Max Verstappen would have a less fun experience, volunteering to cut the grass at the final corner. That would seem to be the only thing Mercedes could compete with Red Bull on this weekend, both Hamilton and Russell having off-track moments and still struggling with a W13, which was bouncing down the main straight like a shit prostitute. Sorry, I do keep forgetting this video is sponsored. Regardless, let's hop into qualifying, and if Aston hadn't caught enough headlines already, they're about to do it again, as Stroll's fetish for crashing into Williams drivers sent Latifi into the wall and brought out the red flag in Q1. But maybe this was a strategic move from Aston, as the extra time allowed them to fix Vettel's car from his shunt in FP3. Problem was, the car was so far off the pace anyway, both ended up in the drop zone at the end of the session. A Williams day was about to get even worse, as Alex Albon ground to a halt and was later disqualified for not having enough fuel in the car. That said, there wasn't much further for him to drop back, let's be honest. Moving on to Q2, and this would be a much quieter affair. The only point of note being that Porridgeman's 103 race Q3 run would finally come to an end after Finn entered the session 12 for Alfa Romeo. Joining him would be his teammate, two AlphaTauris and Mick Schumacher, who outqualified a competent teammate for the first time in his career. The main surprise in Q3 would be Alpine's Fernando Alonso, who had been building up form over the course of the weekend and was looking like a genuine contender for pole coming into Saturday. Then this happened.
Fernando's really been hustling. The old Fernando we know so well. He seems really happy out there as the Ferrari. Oh no!
At the top though, the Red Bull-Ferrari fight was really heating up, and a mistake from Carlos Sainz left Leclerc to take on Perez and Verstappen alone as Q3 headed into its final minutes. In the end though, the Ferrari came out on top, with Norris continuing McLaren's strong form and starting the Grand Prix from the second row in fourth. And speaking of, that's all we've got to go. But before we get into the action, I'm going to do that typical YouTuber thing and say, did you know that 46% of you aren't subscribed? So if you're enjoying the video, clicking that big red button would really help me out. Now, on to Sunday's action. It was an even start from the top two, as Leclerc held the lead on the first lap and Hamilton edged ahead of Perez at turn 1. But the same couldn't be said for Ferrari's Carlos Sainz, who bogged down at the start and was dropping position after position on the first lap. Still, could be worse. Nah, actually scrap that. The resultant safety car bunched the pack back up, and at the restart, Perez was able to jump back past #Blessed for third, while any chances of Sebastian Vettel moving up the field were squandered when he decided he hadn't had enough of gravel traps this weekend. After 10 laps, Leclerc had pulled out a considerable lead, while further back, the McLaren duo were beginning to join the fight with the Mercedes, and we were set for an exciting battle, before Vettel's hatred of Aston Martin front wings reared its head again, bringing out safety car number 2 of the afternoon. This threw all previous strategy out of the window, yet despite all the uncertainty, when the Aston Martin safety car comes out, only one thing can be certain. In some way, shape or form, Lewis Hamilton's race is about to get completely fucked. George Russell at least was able to take advantage, pitting and getting ahead of Perez in the Red Bull. But at the front, this time Leclerc's restart was less impressive, losing the rear out of the final corner and allowing Verstappen to attack going into turns 1 and 3. However, the superior pace of the Scuderia kept the Monegasque ahead despite the close call. Perez then managed to get back past Russell, relegating the Briton down to 4th, and his chances of a podium looked shot until Max Verstappen's Red Bull power unit remembered it was a Red Bull power unit again, and ground to a halt at the first corner. The virtual safety car that resulted allowed Magnussen and Alonso to pit for fresh rubber, however neither were able to make much headway after being caught in the Stroll train for the second half of the race. The one remaining Aston was causing some drama in the closing stages, getting a penalty for treating the main straight like a slalom, and then sticking his elbows out when Porridgeman came calling later on. But none of that affected Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, who dominated the Australian Grand Prix to secure the team's first Grand Slam since 2010, because Bahrain didn't count. For some reason. Perez and Russell would round out the podium, as George benefited from a bit of luck to secure his first rostrum appearance for the Silver Arrows, but given Bahrain 2020, I feel he probably deserved this at some point. Overall though, a pretty solid race, maybe not quite as exciting as others so far in 2022, but given Melbourne's history of well, let's be blunt, pretty shit races, it was good to see the changes working around the new Albert Park track layout. Let me know what you thought of the race down below, and I'll try and join the conversation as I usually do in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop it a like and subscribe for comedy reviews like this for the remainder of the season. Big thank you as well to everyone who donated to the Patreon and followed me on Instagram in the last week. The growth has been incredible, and I really do appreciate the support. If you want to help out, the links are down below in the description. While you're down there, be sure to check out Surfshark as well, and another thank you to them for sponsoring this video. But now I'm off to get some sleep, so I'll see you next time for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, and until then, have a good one.